things upside down and zoom in on the people. The people walking round upside down. You got a balloon, I got a balloon. Boats reappear with soon, they reappear with soon. The horizon line is flat, center sky it looks the same through the lens of my senses. At peace upon the plane.
Okay, I fixed the audio stream. Got cut off last night. Thank you for joining. This is Chief Crow. Where's the curve? Seen a bunch of curverts, but haven't seen the curve. Anyone else? Have they decided who's going to go to Antarctica on the Penguin Tour? Who's going to do it? Who's going to go down and look at the 24-hour sun and come up with the most creative explanation that preserves the model that is the most marketable? I mean, that's the reason for preserving it, I presume. Okay, let's give a few more moments for people to show up. We were just in the Discord server having a chat. Lots to talk about this evening. Let me go ahead and open up the browser capture. For some reason, I've been having gremlins just attacking this computer, but we're just about... Okay, there we go. So I have a lot to go over, but I want to bring up the browser window first, and for some reason, it wasn't picking up. So forgive me while I go through this a little bit of tech support. I mean, I hate to do stuff on the fly, but that's just kind of where we are right now. Okay, I think I figured it out. I'm going to go ahead and open up phones as well. And just a heads up, in about 4 days, we're doing the whole Hoax Con #2, which, you know, I often speak out against proselytizing. You know, I am definitely against that. I'm not for it at all. However, if we do want to have a bridge to the world stage, if you don't want to be totally inaccessible and alien, I think it might make sense to do more of these, because it will produce, I think, more accessible content as far as someone listening for the first time on Saturday, for example, are going to hear my thoughts on the world stage and its use of fictional universes. So we'll get into that and much more. We're joined by Smarty Pants, Austin 108, Observing Reality, Patricia Steer, Armin Reed, Ted Stryker, Hero Paranormal, good timing, Quays, Let's Go, Reverse History. Yes, I heard about your upcoming, well, one of the things you're a part of. Great to be surfing the infinite plane with you. Absolutely. This is going to be a monthly event until eventually it becomes something with more in-person attendees. Algae Rhythms, I landed in the Discord chat in the middle of an interesting, fascinating topic. Yet we were talking about Scientology gang stalking. It's probably safer not to talk about that live. Not that everything here is, or anything here is private. Messianic Charlatan, Garrett Summers. Quay says it'll probably be William Shatner and Neil deGrasse Tyson that make it to Antarctica. Yeah, deGrasse Tyson gets a lot of flack, but I think it's undeserved. I listened to his podcast, and he is very interesting to listen to. His guests are usually worth listening to as well. And his last podcast had a guest that was talking about how we all live within a mental model, and that it's important to keep in mind that the model's not the territory, which is something that I often say here. And I think this is important information. The fact that we are all kind of more or less consenting to this consensus view that this is the world, these are its parameters. And it's like Westworld. You're just given control over to the programmers, and you're just a synth, as long as you get everything filtered through what they are conveying through their acceptable networks. everything we're talking about is not even acknowledged. They don't even acknowledge media skeptics enough to censor it. And I think we can thrive in this environment. Joined by Ears Up, Oswaldo, JG5, Thirst for Truth, Project Honda Rod, Lean Dion. Yes, and Lean Dion, we mentioned you because we were talking about how the synths in Westworld who aren't following the program are called the outliers. And in today's media, we would be considered outliers, I think, in a really real sense. And someone else had said outsider art, and I think outsider media, but that is the point. You're inside their box, you're working within their closed system if you exclude from your perspective the existence of fake news, special effects, psyops, and perception management. And at this point, it's not even worth debating somebody about things like cosmography if they're still, because the model's internally consistent, like it or not. I came across this thread today where someone had said they didn't believe that we're on a globe because the model's flawed in so many ways. And they asked him for some specifics. Here's what he said. This is Owen Benjamin said, the flat earth model is being challenged with an Antarctica trip, and the fear response is, in his longer post, he meanders a little bit, but here's what he says. There's lots and lots of stuff about the current globe model that doesn't work. And I kind of disagree with that. I think the model is designed to be internally consistent and self-reinforcing to those who are inside of it. And the advocates for it defend it and argue from within its assumed parameters. So I don't think you can name something that just, quote, doesn't work categorically. My principal argument against the model has to do with the inclusion that we've observed of CGI, movie magic, and hoaxed scientific miracles. These things have falsified the model. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. It's like, no, we got to go ahead and start at ground zero here and ask, well, can you trust anything from a group of, what do you want to call this? A theater of Psywar. We're talking about mind war specialists. We've been surreptitiously inducted into a global religion. So if you were scared as a conspiracy theorist at one point that there was going to be a one world order religion imposed on all mankind, yeah, we're already in it. Okay, continuing. Algae Rhythm says, let me go ahead and bring this up. I want to make sure no one misses this. At ips.monster, well, I'll put it up later. I actually didn't finish uploading it. I have a flyer for Saturday, so I'll go ahead and put that up later on tonight. But it is Saturday at 3 p.m. Mountain Time. We're going to have a Zoom conference / Hoax Con number 2. It's going to be a Zoom conference. But I am going to live stream it. But the Zoom participants are going to be those who will be able to do the Q&A. So it looks like Tim Pool's calling it quits. I never really got into his work. I'm not listeners in the usual sense, but I have studied them to see what memes they promulgate. And I think we correctly identified him as part of the controlled right. And he was uniform with all the others. And now he's calling it quits. But I seem to recall a couple of months ago, I said that they're going to do a controlled demolition of the alt-right. And then it comes out he's getting paid by Putin. And now he's calling it quits.
Might be the end. We are well off. It is not a financial thing. We make a lot of money. But piece by piece, the structure becomes bigger and bigger and bigger until it becomes impossible to manage. You know, I would never call out anybody personally or individually. I would just say that, like, compound.
Now, I listened to this. He has 30 employees. He's also the CEO. He's overwhelmed with work. Some employees have leaked personal data. And I believe some were stealing stuff on camera. So he's kind of calling it quits. But I kind of think this is a way of explaining how he's going to just conveniently exit the world stage as far as being a part of this thing. And I've been suggesting, too, that maybe they have to get them off the stage because they're not going to be paid or financed because the election will be over. Because ultimately it's about getting votes. Okay, another point here. Now, I'm in a debate with somebody named Mordwand. And he's asking about the claims about the shape of the Earth. And I said, my claims here don't have anything to do with ground observations, but it has to do with the garbage special effects, the science fiction movies that they tell me is evidence of space travel. So even if the Earth is a ball, we haven't seen it. It's the false model that we have to debunk first. And if the ball isn't what they say, whatever, we'll figure that out after. But we have to get our minds right first. This can't be a case of patients trying to take over the asylum. And most of the people in Trutherville are essentially patients at this point. Mind war casualties. J. Dig says, Tim Pool announced his fiancée is pregnant, so he's going to start a family and work less. Okay. Well, good for him. How convenient. How are they going to get rid of Laura Loomer? And I don't think it's a coincidence that, and I'm not, saying anything other than she has been previously associated with the Purge. Trump's campaign hired the publicist for the Purge movie series for the 2020 campaign. So there is this Purge connection with Trump. Laura Loomer jumped on the stage in 2017 during the performance of Julius Caesar in the park because she said it was an assassination of Trump. So she's been involved in this for a long time. And recently the Purge was brought up in tandem with stories surfacing about Laura Loomer and her proximity to Trump. And I only bring this up because she is suing Bill Maher for like $150 million right now. Laura Loomer sues Bill Maher $150 million over Trump joke. To be fair, it wasn't really a joke. He in a very crude way, just basically said that she was having relations with Trump with no factual basis. I think it's a pretty good case for defamation, but she's hitting him up for $150 million, which is rather crazy. Bill has lately, I think, kind of crossed our radar for some of the strange and inappropriate things that he's said in front of underage people. I think the guy might be a little creepy, but not my purview. Just pointing out that Laura Loomer, Laura Looming, her exit strategy, something's going to materialize. Like Nick Fuentes. If Trump doesn't win, he's probably not going to be so relevant. I don't know. I kind of think not. I think the spigot's going to be turned off. Whoever's financing all these puppets isn't going to pay for their careers. They're being paid to do a gig. This probably includes Candace Owen. All these people who uniformly spout the same talking points and tap into the conspiracy crowd, I think their days are numbered. And again, this kind of reinforces that. Let's continue. Musk makes Harris assassination jokes, delivers dark MAGA church sermon. Is he a hero or a villain? He's being increasingly vilified by the media. Der Spiegel called him an emperor. I see him being referred to as an emperor quite often, which ties in with the Pope Elon theme. We play that song quite often. Elon Musk's empire of misinformation. And if you didn't know, those robots that he brought out were remote controlled. And there was a human operator. They were talking to a human being. LARPing as a robot. It's insane. Algae Rhythm says, model originates from the Latin term modulus, meaning a small measure, derived from modus, meaning measure or manner. Yeah, people say, what does shape matter? What difference does it make? And from your perspective, it's going to look the same. You can't see the curve anyway. You're not big enough, so it doesn't really matter from that perspective. You don't have to plan for it. However, if the model is false, it might have significant implications. Like the movie Free Guy. He found out there's some extra land, falsified the model, the NPCs go free. It could be highly significant. And I think it's curious that the people who are really ardent anti-flat earthers do not even allow you to talk about special effects. They won't even entertain it. And that's a blind spot, because we all know what lies are. We understand more and more about manipulation, misinformation. But what about visual lies? What about when they lie to you with pictures and you passively accept it by habit? And my contention is that most of the lies we've accepted have been visual lies. And speaking of which, look at this. This is from Amazing Nature. Mars on the left, Earth on the right. They're the same picture. And I don't think they're flat Earth or anything. This is actually a pro-nature channel. They're just showing how similar it is. The only difference is we have clouds. You know whose father worked on a Mars mission? The Viking was the director of Donnie Darko, which would connect NASA and 9/11 predictive programming. It's all in the same family. And by the way, Donnie Darko was in the subtext of Leave the World Behind. The character Rose was called Donnie Darko. Now, I don't know what this is. This is some kind of... This is bizarre. It's some twisted nativity scene. So this is from a MAGA-friendly church. This man is towing something down the aisle. It looks to be a cradle with a baby and a praying boy and an American flag. I'm going to go ahead and play this clip so you can hear it. Okay, it's YMCA. It says Trump 2024. I don't know what this is, but you can't say it's not a cult of personality at this point, just to be accurate in our description. And that McDonald's thing, it has incensed the left. I was listening to a couple of podcasts. They're super mad about it. They're saying it was not even real. It wasn't really open. It was all staged, stating the obvious. But they're mad because, as shallow as that was, that is what actually affects people. It reaches them. It's all about the symbolism. They're wasting their time aiming for substance, which points to something else. Most people who believe the psyops that we don't believe in haven't really looked into it. It's the low information believers that we're talking about. Low information believers. If they had more information, they wouldn't believe it. And what we stand on here is informed disbelief. Like, we've looked into it and we found reasons to think this isn't believable, so we can reject it until better evidence arrives, or if it arrives. And in our investigations, we found that fakery is the standard operating procedure when it comes to major psyops. I mean, like I said, local news, you can trust them. If they tell you the sky's blue, yeah, they're not lying. A lot of the times, their reportage does match the model. It does match, rather, your experience. They don't always contradict. They're not always lying. But they're a good liar. Media at large is a liar. But good liars lie strategically when they can get away with it, so they can lie more in the aggregate. They don't give it away. They don't lie with every breath. Reverse history says that baby looks like she's not enjoying the MAGA ride. Yeah, I don't know. I think the clip in full, I don't have it all. I think they went out to the back and they had a golden statue of Trump with his arms out in a McDonald's apron. And inside his belly was a fire, and they tossed the baby into the flame. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, that baby's not enjoying it. It does look like they're heading to a sacrifice to Molech. That's what it looks like. Lean Dion says, reportedly E. coli outbreaks at some McDonald's at the moment. MAGAs are calling it a conspiracy, right on cue. Yeah, probably. They'll probably say Trump brought it. He wasn't wearing a hairnet. I saw some people complaining about that. He wasn't wearing a hairnet. I'm surprised those were real fries. I mean, if they were. But I wasn't under the illusion it was real. But there's a certain I'd say actually there's a great majority of people who are going to be predisposed to think it was real. That he just walked in there and started working at McDonald's one day just to show up Kamala Harris. And those would be low info believers. And even if it's not true, it may as well be true. That's their attitude. They will fabricate evidence, of Tom Hanks, and he's a serial killer, baby eater, adrenochrome junkie. They will fabricate evidence and stories, and then you call them out on it, and they say, well, maybe this specifically isn't true, but it's pretty much true. It doesn't work that way. Like, reality doesn't work that way. But most people don't live in objective reality. Like, if you're not a media skeptic, you're not an objectivist. If you don't filter media with critical scrutiny, observing the worldview effect that it gives you by omitting and what it focuses on and whose interest it represents, you're just not an objectivist. By the way, Homeland Security is having a large-scale cyber security exercise on Election Day. Nothing to see here. And then you had an evacuation of all Capitol Hill buildings training exercise on the 21st. So that was yesterday. It was scheduled, so again, nothing to see here. Yesterday we were talking about Elon Musk and the baby seals, and I brought up the connection between Neuralink and experiments on apes, and how this correlates with disease X, the rage virus, which we're pinning on Musk. So it makes all the more sense now, looking at all this symbolism involving the rage virus and the ape, that Musk would also be involved in the literal experimentation and torture deaths of apes. Because if you watched 28 Days Later, that's essentially what happens. If you want to know what they were doing at Neuralink, watch 28 Days Later. Okay, I'm scrolling through my notes. Elon Musk jokes about someone killing Kamala in a church. So you can't tell me this guy's not a fall guy for free speech. If something is staged, they will say it was the result of him putting it out there. Stochastic terrorism. This is what I mean by disease X. The idea that you can isolate mind viruses or ideas that are too dangerous to be circulating in the commons of cyberspace. And the connection between Musk and his presence in cyberspace, and if you're on Twitter, you can't not see him. He will show up in your feed. But his influence pervades all of cyberspace, meaning he has contaminated the commons globally, so to speak. And they're making the same point about Starlink and his CubeSats in space and low Earth orbit, that one individual has way too much power and influence, and he has single-handedly undermined our global commons, both above and below. And if you look even deeper, the flood of his mind viruses, disease X, also includes the whole platforming of anti-vax stuff, right? Which that issue correlates in a few ways, I think, to, in general, the public will eventually, through training and conditioning, accept the idea that we will have to lock down the internet because of this pernicious mind virus that's causing rage. And the movie Civil War, which recently came out, we talked about it. Kamala Harris kills Trump in it. He's in the White House, by the way. In the movie Civil War, it contains the idea of rage from the right against the media. So it fits into this template nicely. And even more, it was directed by the guy who wrote 28 Days Later, further cementing this connection with the rage apes. And the apes in 28 Days Later, the chimpanzees are turned into, or they're forced like Clockwork Orange to watch a bunch of violent news. That's what radicalizes them. And then it becomes something that can transmit, like it becomes a virus. Well, how does that work? Well, if you think about it, the mind virus is transmitted through the spoken word or something on a tweet, something you read. And I used to talk a lot about Hot Skull. In fact, the images you see that I post of the penguin with the burning head, like this one here, it's a reference to Hot Skull. And the movie Hot Skull, it's a series. It's about this mind virus that causes society to shut down, and they have to lock everybody down. And the government mandates that everyone wears headphones, like earplugs. And if you see somebody not wearing earplugs, you run. So it's kind of like this idea that their head contains a number of mind viruses. And if you hear them, you will carry them, and you will then go crazy. So the people who are talking are derisively called the jabbers, which seems like a reference to the vax. But people run from the jabbers, and the main character is making it a point to record what everybody's saying. So he's basically listened to all the conspiracy theories from that. That's kind of what it's conveying. And the authorities are following him around because they can't figure out how is he taking in all these mind viruses and not going crazy. And they call him Hot Skull because, of course, these things cause the head to heat up. LG Rhythm says, Eminem's going to sing in Detroit at Kamala's rally. He lives in Trump's tower, doesn't he? Well, Eminem has always been a part of the PSYOP entertainment complex. If you recall, he did a rap video about the Vegas shooter, blamed guns. Kind of a leftist perspective in many ways, not surprising. But there was something else about Eminem, I think it was a little more recently, where he performed at the Super Bowl and he kneeled at the end for Colin Kaepernick, which I thought was really kind of unusual. But it was the song One Shot. And I thought that song might be some kind of a reference to Trump getting his special day, that whatever they're going to do. The ear wound wasn't it. The ear piercing was not it. It was just the warm-up act. Okay, I'm going to open up phones. It's 505-5104-226. So if you look at these memes, it gives you some insight into how people who believe that Trump was shot at and who plan on voting for him actually see things. Imagine being more upset over the candidate who worked at McDonald's than the candidate that lied about working at McDonald's. Like, they make valid points. Their memes are good. Their meme game is solid, but they're operating within a controlled paradigm, which, you know, it's their choice, but it's more or less like state-olatry at this point. Has there ever been a president so deified? LG Rhythm says, in the Insider magazine, where to find it? Oh, yeah, that one, it's still a little behind. I'm trying to order my first copies of it next week. What I had done is I had put 32 pages in. Originally it was 16, and I kind of underestimated the cost, and then I wouldn't have enough to distribute it, so I kind of postponed it, but I haven't ordered yet. When I do, it will be available internationally through eBay. The eBay store makes it very easy to ship internationally, and so that's the solution there. Okay, this is Laura Loomer, speaking of. This is typical. This is atrocity propaganda. And it exists on both sides. She says, buzzards are circling Asheville, eating dead bodies of humans that haven't been recovered. This message was sent to me by a former police detective in Cook County, Tennessee. Horrific. So what you're getting here is a second or third-hand account with no pictures. One picture would ignite a controversy and possibly solve the problem. But they don't have any pictures. You know, it's like the whole QAnon thing was like they're saving the children who are being trafficked in the tunnels under the ground. If Q could just post one picture, please. Show us one of these subterranean New World Order daycare centers where all these children are being trafficked. One picture, and we'll go take a look. But all we get are these second, third, fourth-hand accounts. So she's like 5 degrees of separation from this, and she's 1.6 million hits in. It says buzzards everywhere. I spent the morning helping a woman, again, this is also anonymous, who runs multiple funeral homes. She had to use her Wi-Fi. She said the refrigerator trucks were full, and the hospitals have 1,000 unidentified bodies. They can't cremate as they have no power. They can't embalm because they have no water. They can't process paperwork because they don't have any power. This is worse than anyone realizes. And here's a picture of Buzzards. Now, I don't believe this is true. I don't think this is enough information to come to a conclusion. And this is the same person who is sharing stories about Haitians eating cats and dogs like a couple of weeks ago. So you can't trust any of these people. They're paid to get engagement, to sow confusion, and just to deliver these not so subtle messages. The message here is FEMA's bad, Trump good, or whatever. But 1,000? This is as bad as the mainstream overhyping the scamdemic. So it's important to just note that it really is both sides. This isn't both sides-ism, not a moral equivalency that I'm creating falsely. No, both sides are in on the PSYOP entertainment complex, and they both employ identical forms of propaganda. And once you identify a propagandist like this, you can just study them as such. But she is an interesting one to follow, because she has commented on the predictive programming for the Trump head wound in the Atlantic. But she said it means that if something happens, it's George Soros. Doesn't start off just eliminating the idea that it even happens. You know, it doesn't like the assessment is always it's going to be real. But yeah, this is from a George Soros magazine, and this is the second example of the foreshadowing regarding the Trump head wound. And if you remember, he was on the golf course for the second attempt when Ryan Routh shows up. And if you look at predictive programming like foreshadowing, you do have some predictive capability here. I mean, ever since Robert Crimo shot up that 4th of July parade with the 47 tattooed on his head, he was going to Trump rallies, he had Oswald on his wall. Ever since then, I said Lee Harvey Oswald is on the world stage, and he's going to aim for the right side of Trump's head where the number is. And back then, it was only a 45. That was before he put the 47 on there. But here's Time Magazine, released this on 9/11. In trouble, and it's Trump backing out of a sand pit. 9/11, and what she said here, is this coincidence or coordination? On 9/11, Time Magazine posted this cover, Donald Trump on the golf course with the words, "In trouble." I would even point out the red flag, because they said that the red flag laws that he was against would have saved him. But this isn't foreknowledge of an attack. This is foreshadowing for a fake event. And all the fake events become part of our fake history. And our history is faked because we have been conquered. And the conquerors write history. And they control the present with fake news. Fake history, they control the past. And obviously, it makes sense that they control our future because everybody follows them like robots. You know, we're all in this Truman Show thing. And it is kind of in your face when you look at these various movies that described. I was just in this Discord server conversation, and we were talking about They Live, the John Carpenter film, and how the people who are in this spell resist, the character resists the glasses being put over his head. But anyway, we were kind of having this conversation about these various movies that show the sim and how the program is what keeps everybody in harmony with the sim. And the Truman Show is one person in a simulation, but I think it's not hard to extrapolate how that can be looked at as a model for how things actually work. You just have to replace the individuals in his movie with the institutions that they probably stand for or could stand for. And I think one of the reasons why the space program is so significant in this worldview monopoly is that's the big picture. That's the game board. Again, no way it's a coincidence that Musk would be one of the primary space fakers and at the same time would have such a huge impact in social media and even the election. These things are not separate. It's also notable that the media will call him out for faking his robots, or for speeding it up, or for faking his, or basically extending the deadline for self-driving cars. He's consistently extending deadlines. This is a strategy of, like future faking. It's kind of a strategy, but it gets people on board. But to please his investors, once in a while, he does these things to showcase what they have. And he got caught faking these intelligent robots that could actually do stuff. And they don't question the space fakery. It's kind of interesting. I have some MAGA stuff here to show you really quick. Julie Green, who claims that God texted her on her Android phone, is doing faith healing at one of these MAGA rallies where Mike Flynn is at. They're also doing baptisms, but this is a faith healing. So what are we looking at here? And when Trump says God saved him, and it was 6:11, a reference to the armor of God, that was a clue here. This was also highly scripted, because the Ephesians 6:11, is that the one, the armor of God? That has been a mainstay of right wing for a long time. Richie from Boston, armor of God. They were always talking about 6:11, and we had connected this number with McVeigh and Waco. And it's been a consistently reoccurring number associated with domestic violent extremism and the Turner Diaries scenario. Again, McVeigh. So it's kind of interesting that they shot Trump at 6:11, and they've managed to turn this into a form of synchromysticism, where instead of seeing it as fake, they see it as the hand of God. They lean towards the mystical explanation for what they saw. It still fails to explain why God didn't spare the firemen, but these are true believers. Smarty Pants says, I hate it when I see a Cybertruck around town. What an ugly piece of space junk. I concur with that. I heard that the frunk, and they call it the frunk, it's the front trunk. I heard that the frunk is actually a guillotine. Like if you put your hand in the side of it and you close it, it'll chop your hand clean off. And it does look like these big metal tables on wheels that we have at the morgues. When you put the bodies in the refrigerators, you're wheeling them around to these big metal, the autopsy tables. And they have these sides that are raised, to catch any fluid leakage. But it has the same look. It reminds me of autopsy tables. Like, I don't know, it's just... It also looks like a toaster on wheels. I've seen some of these things around town. I don't know why anybody would get into one. It looks like it's Nintendo 64 graphics, but it was pointed out in a podcast I was listening to today that it almost seems like Musk was specifically choosing something to tap into the Mad Max post-apocalypse survivor aesthetic. And I think there's something to it because it's pretty much the same vehicle that came out of Blade Runner. And the Blade Runner movie with the replicants and all that was set in November 2019 in Los Angeles. And that's where the Cybertruck, that's where and when it was introduced. So many people pointed out that Blade Runner's truck became a real thing. So it does seem anachronistic in a way. Like the graphics are just kind of weird. It doesn't quite fit, but Cyber dump trucks, says Jennifer Reeves. It does look clunky. But I think the people who drive these things get a lot of flack. I think they're unaesthetic, that's for sure. And it also says, look at me. And even if I had all the money in the world, if I had Andrew Tate's money, I wouldn't purchase 33 Bugattis. You know, I would drive like a Honda Civic because I don't want to be the center of attention driving around. It's just kind of a... I've always wanted to avoid that. But anyway, Cybertrucks, yeah, it's hard not to notice. They're not the most annoying drivers. We have a lot of people who like to roll coal. One of the persons I was talking to in the Discord server said they played this for their coworkers. Everything wrong with the Capitol riots in 21 minutes. And if you haven't seen it, there's a follow-up. Everything wrong with the Capitol riots in 889 angles, Act 2. This one is key to understand what happened on January 6th, because what it shows unequivocally is that the riots already started while Trump was still speaking, and while anyone who would have perhaps wanted to take part in it would have had to have walked 45 minutes. So it wasn't like Trump was right outside of the thing. There was a 45-minute walk to the ellipse, from the ellipse to the Capitol. And during that 45-minute period where people could have gone, the theatrical riot had already begun. The fakery had already started. They were already inside the Capitol. So it was staged. It was a closed movie set. Nobody died. Ashley Babbitt's not dead. And one of the things that is probably hardest for people to come to terms with is that Trump is in on it. And you just got to follow the logic. If Trump is in on January 6th, which was way beyond an inside job, it was a bipartisan hoax. It was a hoax that both sides were complicit in. Both sides in media, from Alex Jones to the other side, they're all in on this fakery, including Trump. He's the head of the snake. So this automatically should have you question what 713 was really about. That could not have been an assassination attempt. He's part of the movie. So he's not even like a hero fighting for the people. He's part of this massive operation, which I think for the most part is creating this false view of nationalism so they can destroy it. So I don't think that anyone who's voting for Trump has really done their due diligence, because this work by Woo's News doesn't just expose January 6th. It actually is damning when it comes to Trump and the entire story. But people don't want to step out of the movie because they're in a movie. Reverse History says Musk is a Burning Man participant, an event I see prominently promoted in the cinema via Road Warrior, Mad Max 2. I liked Furiosa. I just watched it. It's a really great movie. But you have a point here. There's a lot about that movie. Obviously, it's built on this future dystopia after we soak up all the dino juice because of greed and capitalism, and everything dies. Typical stuff. But the imagery there, yeah, it's certainly part of a dystopian aesthetic that reinforces the paradigm that they're implementing. And that's why I think it's also notable that the MAGAs are often shown in big truck convoys, rolling coal, big flags. They're the cause of climate change. But these things are meant to be synonymous. The sinking of the West. And I think they're trying to create the epitome of everything that's wrong with it in MAGAism. And Musk is a huge part of this. Again, Disease X is the next COVID-19. The WHO said their placeholder name for the next big one was Disease X. And when Musk changed Twitter to X, and they'd already said over the last year that he had opened the gates, he had released the Kraken. I had already seen what they were doing with Musk, Fall Guy for free speech, but when he called it X, I made this connection that Disease X is the mind virus, and that they used 2020 to train humanity. Collectively, we were all trained into this model of this contagious thing is released, it threatens all of society, individuals can carry it, the collective must lock down, and every individual must adhere to certain behaviors and, of course, comply with certain things in order to protect itself. So they make the individual carrier this thing that the collective has to expel. Like this, it's basically like a religious paradigm, saved versus unsaved. But they've already done it with the physical counterpart to sin, the virus. But now they're going to do it with the mind virus. They're going one step deeper. Again, after 9/11, they can pat you down at the airport and see what's beneath your clothes. After 2020, now they have, the state has a compelling interest in knowing what's in your blood. And then, of course, we're getting to the point where now they need to know what's in your browser history. What kind of mind viruses are you carrying? You're considered to be a hot skull if you're a conspiracy theorist. LG Rhythm says 713 was to get the rise of the Christian Reich started. Yeah, I agree with that. And the predictive programming in the movies is voluminous. We've talked about it. There's so much there. We were ready for the headwind on Trump. But within the alt-right media ecosystem, there was a lot of build-up to the shooting. They were being prepared for it repeatedly for years. It had been drummed into their heads, and then General Flynn and others had been having these open talks about, if this happens, this must happen next. And General Flynn is all but calling for violence now. And I don't think that they're really going to do some kind of, violent acts, but I do believe that they're going to fake it. Here's the guy that fell off the balcony. I haven't looked too deeply into the story, but he's wearing a shirt that says Illuminati. A little suspicious. Good point, Leanon X is a lab leak. In 2020, they on YouTube, they banned the combination of bowl of soup and bat. You could not emoji bat soup. They blocked it. In 2020, I still collect quarters from 2020 that has the bats on it in a bowl of soup, but they blocked it. But then later the story evolved until they said, yeah, it was a lab leak. Does anybody here remember the name of the guy who blew the whistle on it? And how old he was? That's an aptonym. Aptonym? The name that follows the aptronym.
Aptronym.
A person's name amusingly appropriate to their occupation. His was Wee Lion. I think he was 33. Wee Lion, 33-year-old, and he was like the first one to die. I think he even took a selfie as he was dying. We saw a picture of him with the mask on. But there's always these clues they drop. He had pink cocaine in his blood. I tend not to believe any of these stories, and would we know that now if it was real? Like, wouldn't there be a 6 month, 6 weeks? How long does it take for toxicology, first of all, to take the body, to do the autopsy, to get the lab results, and then somehow for that to leak to the public when it's private medical information? I don't think the public should know what was in his blood. And when I hear stuff like this, when things are reported, such as this, my go-to is it's probably fake and some kind of psyop with a deeper meaning. So we're talking about this individual, Liam Payne, former One Direction member, balcony fall. And someone pointed out that Javier Milei had said, "I am not on the balcony." He tweeted this on the same day. I don't know what that means. But yes, it's certainly strange. Another one, Sydney Wilson, 33-year-old. Again, you got to quarantine the 33-year-olds. But room 322, 6'6". So 322, 66, 33. What's with all these numbers? And I think there's more. Somebody said she was chanting something as she ran out with a knife. And a lot of people remarked on how fake it looked. Like, could this be an AI-prompted fake news story? How would you know? You tell the AI, I need some body cam footage of a 6'6" mad woman with a knife jumping out of room 322 before being taken down. Like, it's not beyond the scope of it to create something like that. And true or not, real or not, doesn't really matter. It will go viral. Okay, I said phones are open, but I had accidentally closed that browser window, so now they're officially open. 505-510-4226. Again, just a quick reminder, Saturday is a Zoom conference, and I'll put out a newsletter tonight in which you'll have a link if you want to sign up, or you just can watch it live. I'll make sure you get the live stream notification. The purpose of what we're doing is to proliferate our mind viruses. It's sort of like the opposite of Disease X, though. It's almost like we're disseminating the mind war inoculation. Like, I'm kind of the Bill Gates of auto-hoaxing here. Because what we're doing with Hoax Con is we're describing a methodology, an approach to consuming media, which would allow people to sidestep a lot of the over-engagement with agitprop, atrocity propaganda, and psyop theater. This is actually kind of a public service, the fact that we even make it available. Cult deprogramming. I think it's even expensive. I've never done it, but there's a number of people who specialize in cult deprogramming, which is a thing. And that's what we're looking at. It's helpful to look at this as a cult. LG Rhythm says the Russian oligarch and former vice president mysteriously died in the same day after falling out of a window of the 11th floor apartment. Yes. So there must be something. There's always more to the story. There's no coincidences on the world stage. And so many of these things are designed to put people into an alternate reality. This is one of the more insane things that I talked about the other day. Just a brief recap. This individual is posing as a time-traveling author. The author of the Baron Trump time-traveling adventures. He's posing as a time-traveling author who is here to help Trump win the election. And this is the book that does contain eerie bits of predictive programming for Trump. However, he's going around dressed up as this author, and he's being promoted as a time traveler. This is proof time travel is real. But it turns out that before he was this character, he was actually this kind of normal-looking guy, clean-shaven, who got kicked out of his university gig for some computer hacking scandal. Then he grew out his beard and took the Q pill. But it looks to me like he didn't change his name, but he took on a role. And it was in this capacity that he did the cyber symposium next to the Pillow Man, Mike Lindell. And he proposed this idea that would overturn the election. So last-minute hopium. There's like this Hail Mary pass for those who couldn't believe that Biden won. So they bring out the pillow guy, and Code Monkey Z, who was 33 at the time, many believed him to be Q, but he's connected to Q. And Code Monkey Z was the owner of the 8chan site where Q drops happened. So he was there with the time traveler and the pillow man. Code Monkey Z / Q, the pillow man and the time traveler, were overturning the election real time. And at that time, most people thought that this time-traveling author was JFK Jr. in disguise. But no, he's this guy in disguise. And I did inform a lot of the time travel believers, and they blocked me, they chastised me, and they basically said I was a terrible person for telling the truth. You know, was it truth sounds like hate to those who hate the truth? In minor news, Alex Jones shaved his head. This was being shared. He shaved his head as sort of a statement that he's getting ready for war. Alex Jones is bald now. A number of articles have come out about this. Alex Jones ordered to pay $965 million. Isn't that crazy that people still think that he's not on Team Sandy Hook? That's an important point to keep in mind as well. If you're going to be objective about this stuff at all, you really have to maintain a dispassionate view here and not think these individuals are anything other than on the other side of the screen. What's up, ADR? Thanks for joining. Yeah, we're just here talking about recent developments on the world stage, and Saturn Day we're going to be doing Hoax Con number 2. My focus is going to be fictional universes. I think it's a key component to everything. We're way past the point of falling into the default of saying that we're looking at eerie coincidences or some kind of mystical paradigm to explain these coincidences. We know what's happening. And now we can talk about the utility of things like fictional universes. Like, why do we have so many instances where the Batman narrative overlaps perfectly with news stories? Even to the point where the villains, the Joker shooter, or Joker Sarnoff, the Boston bomber, like, these are intentional. And I think these are dead giveaways as to who's behind, or who's the mind behind the psyop. Like, Kubrick has Apollo 11, 9/11, his signature's all over it. Kubrick's signature is on the Trump shooting on his ear. That would be a callback to Full Metal Jacket and the target on the side of Joker's helmet. And Joker represents, in the subtext, JFK, who did a little bit of war photography or something. But one of the key insights to our analysis of predictive programming as merely a way to entrain the public to future fake news and fake history, one of our points has been to note who wrote the predictive programming script, the scene, who's responsible. Like, recently we've been talking about Francis Ford Coppola and Megalopolis as a metascriptor. James Cameron, metascriptor. But what real-world events are these directors also a part of? So Kubrick, Apollo 11, I would say James Cameron and the LA riots. James Cameron and the Cop City riots. And I can substantiate this. I can show you the predictive parallels, or rather the programming parallels in the entertainment to these future news events. Avatar 2, Way of Water, foreshadows the riots in Atlanta, again, over Cop City. And the storyline with Cop City was this 80-acre forest that was going to be leveled for the cops to build a training ground. And Atlantis has these connections, and the environmentalists said, if you cut down these woods, there's going to be floods. So in the movie Avatar 2, Way of Water, and by the way, during this time, the WEF is talking about floods. You have Ellen DeGeneres pointing out the floods in her neighborhood. It's all about floods. So the Way of Water has this Atlantis-like group. And it has these Marines, who are like the police in Cop City, who are going to basically do to Pandora what we did to the Earth. And so the Na'vi, the blue people, fight off the new arrivals with sticks, with spears and arrows and rocks. Down on Earth in Cop City, the environmentalists who are living in the trees, hanging out in the trees, just like these characters in Avatar, were throwing rocks and sticks at the police when one of them, their leader, was shot. So you have these direct parallels here. And he was shot, the autopsy revealed, through the palms of his hands. So he was meditating when they shot him or something, but they tried to make him into a martyr. And I was looking into the photography of this whole event, this Cop City riot, and this environmentalist getting shot by the police, and how the BLM merged with the environmentalists after. But this character who was shot, I think they called him the Tortoise or something, they showed this picture of him at home, and he had a few books in front of him. One of them was Goodnight Moon, like a children's book, and the other one was Where the Wild Things Are. So Pandora is a jungle moon. It's not a planet, it's a jungle moon. Where the Wild Things Are is about a character who puts on a wolf costume and he goes to the jungle where the wild things are. So he's like an avatar. In Avatar, the main character as an avatar, goes to the jungle moon. So Goodnight Moon, where the wild things are, in an avatar, like a wolf costume. In Where the Wild Things Are, the child becomes the king of the wild things. In Avatar 2, this character essentially becomes their ruler, even though he's not one of them. He's just wearing a costume. He's an avatar. So they put these books there as props to connect Avatar 2 to the martyr killed in this Cop City drama in Atlanta. So again, I'm saying James Cameron directed that fake staged event and was part of that event, as well as we've already pointed out, James Cameron admitted that Terminator 2 had some interesting connections to the LA riots, if you haven't followed that story. But here's another example, because Daniel Penny's in the news right now, and Synchromorpheus, a must-follow Twitter channel, had arrived at some interesting connections, suggesting that the strangling death of Jordan Neely by Daniel Penny was directed by Jordan Peele from Nope, from Get Out. And Get Out specifically has predictive programming for this event. Interesting breakdown. One of the things I want to do with the Hoax Con 2 is show how we're able to identify the creative minds behind the various psyops on the world stage because they put their signatures in there. And it's very nuanced. And it's also predictable, which it should not be. Thirst said Alex Jones shaved his head and added some beard dye. Well, I hope for his neighbor's sake that he is stocked up on storable food items. We know how he acted last time things got a little crazy. Sizing up his neighbors, saying his daughters aren't going to starve, even if it means he's going to have to eat his neighbors. He went full-blown, like, cannibal, like Hannibal Lecter. He was just way into it. He was deep into it. And then later he said, nah, this was just some kind of satire. It's like, no, you're not Bill Hicks anymore. So you can't just say you're only joking. You put it out there. Yeah, he was trying to be like, was it Jonathan Swift? Like a modest proposal. No, it was beyond satire. He was serious. No, now that I'm here on Twitter really quick, I see John LeBon had responded to one of my tweets. I am going to retweet one of his tweets. I'm going to share it here. This is an interview you should listen to with Will Duffy. Will Duffy is behind organizing this experiment to send flat earthers to Antarctica. And he was amazed to see how many people turned it down. Reverse History says, Fallout, Episode 4, directly preceding the episode with the bleeding Trump foosball player, has a scene of a cannibalistic character, the Ghoul, saying he's going to eat his neighbor's ass. Fascinating. Because Alex Jones literally said he was going to eat neighbor's ass. That he would eat them like corn on the cob, and that he would eat the liberals first. And I think he even sells some storable food items, some beef jerky with that flavor. Yeah, Alex Jones is now a skinhead, good connection, and a literalist. See, you can't separate Alex Jones from this because he was radicalized at Waco. Bill Hicks was there, by the way, too. But Waco, where 33-year-old Dave Koresh was burned by the ATF over 1.6 million rounds they had stored illegally, January 6. Alex Jones was radicalized there. Timothy McVeigh, I think there he was passing out flyers, but then again, you know, he was later associated with the Turner Diaries, which he used to revenge Waco by blowing up the building in Oklahoma City on the anniversary of Waco. And Timothy McVeigh was executed on 6/11/01, 90 days before 9/11. So 33-year-old McVeigh executed 6/11. The facility had 33 acres. He was P.O. Box 33. They had a 33-year-old musician playing some kind of classical music as he was being executed. You can look this up. The McVeigh story is fake. He killed 168 children or people, supposedly. But he's been identified as this Florida-based FBI agent named Paul Weisable. And Paul Weisable is credited with having saved 168 children from trafficking. So like, oh, one guy blew up a daycare center and killed 168, one saved 168. It's the same person. Totally fake, totally a construct. But my point in bringing up McVeigh is the Turner Diaries, white nationalism, McVeigh, Alex Jones, Dave Koresh. It's all part of the same mix. And Waco is where Trump kicked off his campaign. And the day before he kicked off his campaign, Netflix released Waco, American Apocalypse. So how did Netflix know to release a documentary about right-wing extremism and connect it with Trump so succinctly? And then while Trump's in court on 4/19, the anniversary of Waco, Maxwell Azarello sets himself on fire outside of the courthouse next to a hot dog stand. So a Burning Man, 4/19. There's a consistency, there's a story being told here, and we've unpackaged it for the most part. My point here is that the skinhead inference from Alex shaving his head is probably very accurate, very astute. So I appreciate whoever chimed in with that, Thirst. N.A. Literalist said, I just said send flat earthers to the Antarctica yesterday. I'm willing to go. If I had $10,000, I would go right now. And if anybody wants to pay to send an IPR reporter and myself, because I need someone to cover it, to the South Pole, I will give total rights to the ensuing documentary. We'll create a documentary, and you will own it. So there's an incentive to financing it if anyone is interested. And maybe we can get there before any controlled op agents go. If nothing else, we'll take some photos with the penguins. Ask them what they know. But the fact that no one is gone just shows you the power of the Conference Earth movement, where it went from being a movement of getting information, challenging false explanations, potentially false explanations, and then it became about this community, and then it became religious, and then it became married to a model. Once they adopted a model, they became a closed system, and they started debating the merits of the model instead of getting facts to test their model. So here we are, years later, and someone's offering to pay a lot of the loudest exponents of this idea to go to Antarctica to test their model, and they're all refusing. There's a list of people who have shamefully refused. Eddie Bravo refused. Alex Stain refused. Deep Inside the Rabbit's Hole refused. There's a list of people who just say don't go. A lot of people were just against it. Just like a lot of people were against Mad Mike's mission to go to the Kármán line. Like, why would they be against it? It was strange, really. Like, of all the people who should want to know. But that's what happens, I think, when people fall in love with a model. They attach themselves to having all the answers and all the explanations. They have the perfect religion. I mean, when I use model, it's like a religion. I'm talking about your internal concept of the world, what frames it, and how that might bias you toward certain explanations. Garrett Summers, have you read 1984? Yeah, I read it, and I think they implemented it by selling it to us as a positive development, as a desirable lifestyle. So, oh look, this is a nightmare scenario. In the future, there's going to be cameras everywhere, and you're not going to have any privacy. And here we are, 2024, the age of, like OnlyFans, commodifying what was formerly private, where it has no value if it's private. All of your thoughts, social media is just a big mind-reading machine. So they read our thoughts. We're incentivized to put everything out there. Our photo albums, our family histories, our social networks. So no, we are self-surveilled. And it's 100% incentivized. So 1984 I think, in a lot of ways, perhaps underestimated the power of perception management and public relations to change public behavior. Like Edward Bernays figured it out. And Edward Bernays, if you haven't read his work on propaganda, it's worth reading. He's known for creating publicity stunts, the father of public relations. But one of the things about him that's most interesting to me is he's the great uncle of the first CEO of Netflix. So like that's interesting. And then you connect that with their mutual relationship to Sigmund Freud, and this shows you that they know how to manipulate you consciously and subconsciously. But what I think he really more or less figured out or mastered was techniques of influencing people in large groups. So your autonomy doesn't matter because the collective, the Borg, the hive mind is going to move as one. Thirst for Truth says, will Flat Earth Dave have to reimburse everyone for his app if they see the 24-hour sun? I heard him say that his greatest fear is that they will dangle a sun simulator from a helicopter and trace a circle around them and trick them into conceding. That's what he thinks. And that's his reason for not going. Like, that's my reason for going. Like, let me go record a sun simulator dangling on a helicopter. I'll get out a telescope. I'll look at it. Like, that's ridiculous. But that's grasping at straws. Like, why wouldn't you go? The fact is, he could pay for his own ticket. He could have used the profits from the app, instead of throwing it into crypto, into sending people to Antarctica. I mean, those are his decisions. You know, I also want to point out, too, that when Mad Mike Hughes started going viral, deep inside the rabbit hole, fed, dearth, he put out a video warning people in the mass media not to pay attention to him. They said he's not a real flat earther. It's like, no, he wasn't. In the sense that he didn't know. He wanted to check. So many people have just missed that bit of nuance there. Like, we don't trust the sources, not because we don't trust their math. Their model is internally consistent to whatever they're going to have you try to debate them on. How far should you see, etc. Like, you're never going to win. The only way you're going to get any kind of understanding of what this place is by going outside. And moreover, explaining why what we're shown is augmented by special effects. It's a huge blind spot. Again, you have to include special effects. Special effects are a factor. You can't just hand wave it away. And I heard Fight the Flat Earth try to suggest that me arguing that these are special effects is an argument from incredulity. Like, I don't believe they could do this, therefore it's special effects. And no, that is the opposite. I'm talking about green screen glitches, light diffusion on the spacewalks indicative of it being underwater. And we were talking about harnesses. Are they using harnesses, or are they using something like out of Christopher Nolan's Inception, where they have some kind of a seesaw and a counterbalance that allows them to simulate zero-G. And no one was able to explain away vein gate, the astronaut who flips and then his forehead vein pops out and his cheeks inflate, his eyes swell shut, his ears stick out, and his face turns red. Like, I'm pretty sure this guy's on Earth, hanging upside down. We have way too many examples of special effects to let them hand wave it away. So they're just not informed. They're literally reality denialists. And what they're missing, and this might help them, and if you're explaining to somebody what they're missing, is that they are being lied to visually. And if you're not accounting for the visual lies, then you're gullible. It's like you're just downloading a false set of narratives, a false paradigm. You're just a passive receptacle to propaganda at that point. Never forget bubbles in space. No, they already diffused it. Bubbles in space are no longer a talking point. Even though you can point these things out, they'll say it's space dust. Space dust. And my take on that is, if there's so much space dust that on every spacewalk we see it, then why don't we see clouds in space between the Earth and the 238,000 miles to the moon? Wouldn't there, in the aggregate, be enough of this space dust that is so plentiful in low Earth orbit to create the occasional cloud? Like, occasionally there should be dark patches in the sky blotting out entire constellations. It's never the case. If there's no clouds in our local atmosphere, you can see for light years. You can see all the stars. Like, what about the space dust? So the lack of space clouds debunks outer space, in my opinion. Maybe not in and of itself, but it's a big clue. You got to look for what should be there but isn't. They need to explain that away. Yeah, mice without spacesuits in space, that was a pretty big one as well. That was in 2019, December 2019, the CRS-19 launch, where Musk sent genetically modified mice to space, and there was a mouse on the outside of the rocket. That was a perception test. I showed it to a lot of people. I showed it to Mick West, and he said to me, that's a video compression artifact. So then later he said, wait, I was wrong. That is ice. It's actually just ice. And it is not a mouse. And I said, could you at least concede with me that it looks like a mouse? And he said no. And I'm like, that's crazy. Because whether or not it's a mouse, it looks like a mouse. Like, I see clouds, and hey, look, that cloud looks like a couch with a hand coming out of it. Like, anybody looking at it would agree, yeah, that looks like what you said. But we're not trying to argue that is what it is with the clouds. And so at a minimum, he should be able to concede that looks like a mouse. Now, I'm saying it is a CGI mouse, and that it's not really in space. I'm not trying to argue that there's an actual mouse on the outside of the rocket. I know that's impossible. But even from their perspective, they should be saying, even though it's not possible for a mouse to be on the outside of the rocket, it is remarkable how this space ice at Mach 8 is animated to look like a mouse. At a minimum, they should be saying, that's amazing. And they can't even concede that, which is sad. They can't appreciate nature and just these random things that could possibly occur. But what they also miss is that this was the very mission where they were sending, quote, Mighty Mouse to space. And who's Mighty Mouse? Mighty Mouse is a cartoon mouse who flies in outer space without a spacesuit. So here you have the Mighty Mouse mission, and ice forms in the shape of a mouse on the outside of the rocket, and Elon Musk can't draw attention to it and say, hey guys, the coolest thing in the world happened. I'm sending Mighty Mouse to space, and space ice spontaneously formed into a mouse and ran around on that flight. He didn't acknowledge it. It even had a tail. It had Mickey Mouse ears. Mousegate. Now, why wouldn't he acknowledge it? Because he's guilty. Because that had to have been, could only have been, a CGI artifact, a deliberate animation inserted onto the fabricated SpaceX rocket launch. It gives away the fact that this thing was a hoax. I have a video of it. And by the way, when I talked about this, I picked up a follower on Twitter who was the head of security for Starlink satellites. And I checked, and our only mutual connection was Elon Musk. So there, you're looking at space ice, a video compression artifact, or your eyes are lying to you and you're not seeing anything. Or you're seeing a remarkable coincidence. What do you see? I mean, I'm looking at a mouse. A cartoon mouse put there as a joke that he can't take credit for because it would give away the fact that this whole thing is just a psyop. Dirk says, are all politicians all liars? As are all people saying space is real, it's all a lie? Yes. But there are different levels of lying and different levels of culpability. There are unwitting liars. We live in a world of lies, and what do you expect? You're not really given any non-lies to traffic in, so it makes a liar out of you. But I don't think people know the magnitude of it. Well, they certainly don't. They can't. They won't understand it. It's a huge blow to the ego to recognize that you've been duped and fooled. And I think that's why media fakery is so easily understood by people who had got their start questioning these NASA hoaxes. Because if they can lie to the world and fool everybody on that scale, then these other things are quite easy to understand. And it has a unified purpose. They're faking above and below. It's the same fakery department. Jay Nelson says, looks like a penguin. Kenny Edwards says, if you're in masonry, you can't get out. Well, you can stop paying your dues, and then you're considered to be a fellow. But what does it really mean? You're talking about a club with these archaic oaths that they no longer enforce. We had this conversation yesterday about the Glasgow smile, the Joker smirk, which seems to have its Joker, it's Brandon Lee the Crow. That Smile movie has the same thing, but it seems to originate with the Black Dahlia murder. We were talking about this in one of our talks. But anyway, no, they no longer do the Colombian necktie thing. The Masonic penal codes. But I would say that we live in a very Masonic culture. Like, we've all been collectively baptized into some kind of religious paradigm, just not on the insider level. LG Rhythm says, cognitive dissonance to see the mouse yet deny it's a mouse. Yeah, this is what I'm saying. Are you going to believe me or your lying eyes? And that is a mouse. And this is a problem. Because however you look at it, it's a problem. One, it's an astoundingly remarkable coincidence that is being ignored. Two, it's evidence of some kind of tampering, which could not have been during the live feed, which means that this was pre-produced. The problem with that proposition is it would reveal that the rocket launch that you see from the ground doesn't connect to what you see when it's in, quote, space. Because obviously the thing that you see from space was pre-produced. So what do you mean? Space launches are pre-produced? Well, then that can't be true. Because if that's true, then how did the ISS receive it on time? If it was a pre-produced movie. So this looks to me like Elon Musk's sense of humor got the better of him. A little inside joke, an Easter egg. It wasn't meant to go this far. And as I said, after I talked about it, Starlink's chief of security started stalking me on Twitter, and I messaged him because we saw that this guy was only following me and Musk. And I said, tell Elon the IPS knows. Hashtag Mousegate. But yeah, this is 100% proof that space is fake. Or it's faked. It's fakeable. And again, this is like a house of cards. If this mouse was inserted there by Musk as a joke, then this was pre-produced. If this was pre-produced, then this module did not go to the ISS. And that matters because what keeps the ISS in orbit are these periodic boosters where the supply module comes in, it bumps it, and it gives it a little more momentum, and they get their supplies. So you can't just say, okay, well, this was faked, and then say the ISS is real. No, this is like, it's a contiguous unit. It's like Jenga. And you're pulling from the entire bottom row here. if this is fake, nobody sent anything to the ISS, then how is the ISS even staying up? Like, this just pulls their whole story apart. And what's kind of funny about this, too, is Elon Musk often references the number 42 from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it says, "Don't panic, because the world's about to be destroyed." "Don't panic" was on the dash of the Tesla Roadster sent into space. But another thing about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is the use of mice. So the mice, we find out, are the most intelligent species on Earth, and that they have been studying us this entire time. So there might be another inside joke here connected to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Not quite sure, but anyway, it's a joke. And I've shown this to globe conformists, globe defenders, gloobers, glurfs, whatever they call themselves today. I think they call themselves gloobers. And I say, "Hey, what do you see here?" And they're always saying the same thing. They're just like, "You're crazy, man. 2 plus 2 is 5. I'm like, "No, it's not. Count your fingers." And they're like, "No, 2 plus 2 is 5. Stop trying to tell me that's a mouse." Like, they can't handle it. Cognitive dissonance. They wear earplugs, like that movie Hot Skulls. Like, that's what we're basically doing here, is we're presenting evidence that falsifies their model. Lean Dion, "Biker Mice from Mars," great 90s cartoon. Yeah, I like the artwork. I was studying it recently. We have this graphic novel script. It needs to be animated, really, which involves the penguins accessing an underground base in Antarctica and getting their hands on unregulated nootropics, smart drugs, and several generations later, these exceedingly intelligent and brainy penguins avail themselves of whatever's in the laboratory, and they get into a cyborg tech, and they give themselves opposable thumbs and fingers, and they self-evolve. Eventually, though, in this storyline, they do encounter the deep underground Mars base, which hasn't been populated yet, except by rats. And these rats have similarly undergone a transformation of their own. I had this plot line that involved Martian rats in the deep underground Mars base. And yeah, they got into everything, including the smart drugs. Kenny Edwards, interesting question. Outside of our purview, what we're mostly focused on here is deconstructing the mental model the consensus has mistaken for the real world, the matrix that they have pulled over your eyes. And we have discovered through our analysis that we're looking at the deliberate entrainment of the masses to propaganda and fake news through entertainment and fictional universes and psychological operations, perception management. Our minds, we're like putty in their hands. They mold us collectively. And what we have determined is that the net effect of faking the news day after day, week, month, year, decade, it becomes history. And they're faking history. And they're controlling history. So they therefore control time. And it's given away countless times. And we were talking about Megalopolis, and the characters, the design authority, are the metascriptors. At the very beginning of the movie, these characters who look like the strangers from Dark City about time control, they're doing a 9/11-like detonation in Manhattan. They stop time. Well, the stopping of the time represents their control over time, the stories that they write. It happens when they say it happens, and they coordinate it however they do, but they have total creative control over history and therefore time. If you haven't seen Megalopolis, I think it will make more sense if you incorporate into it that in its subtext, it is both Dark City and the Matrix. Like, these are both built into it, along with our current political environment. King Ravana says there was a lot of E. coli and human trafficking in the news today. Well, we're getting close to the election. We're less than a month. So I'm expecting they're just going to do the, what I call brute force mind hacking. And by that, I mean, they'll throw everything and see what sticks. It's not even about finesse or believability. It's about throwing so much that you can't possibly take the time to refute it. And so it's going to be overhyping every disaster. They're dragging out all the QAnon dog whistles. I don't know if we're going to be treated to another fake assassination attempt. Maybe they'll arrest Musk. And there's a very weak attempt to bring back the child trafficking stories from 2015, 2016 with the longshoremen. They said the longshoremen were protesting because they found out that children were being trafficked in those big crates. It's really disturbing how comfortable so many people are with lying to themselves, living in these bubbles of community-generated fan fiction. It's delusion. It's literally this collective delusion. And it can only be the result of sustained mind war. And we've been under it. We've been under it. It's intergenerational. I mean, look how far back the alien invasion narrative, War of the World, goes. Like, none of this stuff is new. Okay, well, this has been hopefully conspirataining, just a short catch-up on a few things. It seems like it's a little calm right now. Who knows what's about to blow up? I brought up Tim Pool calling it quits, and to me that just fits what's going on here. Part of the controlled demo of the alt-right. Alex Jones has gone full skinhead. So what that indicates, I don't know. Musk has been painted up as the Joker and Dark MAGA on Drudge. And then Donald Trump going to McDonald's has infuriated the left. They're totally mad about it. And then we're talking about the meaning of perceiving for yourself. You know, they say think for yourself. Thinking for yourself doesn't do you any good if the parameters have been established for you by liars who are purposefully excluding the role of perception management and psywar in what you're shown. What are they excluding? And this is a magic show. And that's one of the main points here that I always kind of defer back to, is that we have to include the full picture. You know, you can't just be in the audience watching the magic show spellbound. And when we see something like this, the mouse on the rocket, it's a perception test. Are you going to perceive for yourself? Rather than just, because like again, thinking for yourself could be a trap. If thinking for yourself means you're getting your information curated from their boxes, left or right, or whatever it happens to be. And in our case, perceiving for ourselves means being highly critical of what's on the screen at face value. Just not accepting everything, taking it for granted. Like if you take for granted that this is a rocket in space, then you're left with a number of explanations. A limited number. It has to be ice. It has to be some kind of exhaust or some byproduct from the exhaust. There has to be some rational explanation. And I'm saying, does there? Does the explanation have to comport with their model? And that's how they're trapped. Since they're believing in the model, their explanation for this mouse has to comport with that. Our explanation comes from outside of their model. That our explanation includes fakery, including that of space travel. So when we're looking at this, we can say, well, aside from ice and jet fuel somehow constituting the shape of a mouse, we can also include special effects, CGI. The simplest explanations, Occam's razor here, says that that is a mouse, an animated mouse, deliberately inserted by the same people who are faking like this thing is going to the space station. When the space station is a place on Earth. And that was given away by that swollen vein on that astronaut's forehead. King Ravana says automation of Happy Meal is around the corner. Oh yeah, automated and drone delivered. That's going to be the future. for all the talk about people being replaced and immigration and stuff, it's like it's the robots that are gonna make you obsolete. You know, I was reading some literature from one of these occultists from the 60s, one of the Satanists. It was the high priest wrote something about the future where in their ideal world it would be fascist and the masses would be replaced by robots and the excess populations would be shipped off to space ghettos. And they even advised when they start shipping people to the moon, don't go. But at the same time, don't spoil it because all of the people that you really don't care for are likely gonna go. So he suggested that they were glamorizing space travel because at some point in the future they're gonna offload the excess population. That's just misanthropic and hateful, but it's interesting as far as getting a little bit of insight into how the elite might actually think about people. Replacing you with robots. Okay, this is Chief Crow Auto Hoax. Thanks for joining. I'm going to send out the rest of the archives, and Saturn Day will be very interesting. Just a heads up, it's going to be live. It's also going to be Zoom for those who want to participate in the Q&As. Reverse History, Armin Ree will be represented. Myself, I have something, and other people have sent me some art, some music. So the Auto Hoax Con number 2, it's going to kind of pick up where the last one left off. It's going to be a monthly thing. And this one should be bigger and better than the last one, and it will build off of it. So if you go to ips.monster, make sure you get on the newsletter. WOPR33, as far as the press pass and stuff, I am waiting for a new printer. So I'm looking for one right now. I'm in the process of trying to get a printer for press passes. Zazzle stopped, and they were my go-to supplier. And they were fast, international, great product. But I'm going to see if I can find a local source, and I'll ship them direct. But yeah, that's going to be resolved within the next couple of days. So anybody waiting on anything, everything is in the process. You know, I would crowdfund McToon and Fight the Flat Earth to go to Mars. Like, I would crowdfund it. Send them. Send any of these individuals to space. I don't think they could go. Like, I think the only people who can go to space are those who have been given the necessary security clearance, but I think they also have to meet certain requirements, like acting skills, certain skill sets. Like, I couldn't see Fight the Flat Earth and McToon dangling from bungee cords and pulling it off. And I can only imagine if McToon was upside down, how red his face would be. Like, I don't think they could fake space with any of these astronauts. I don't think they could pull it off. Even if we raised the money for it, they wouldn't be allowed. Anyway, this is Auto Hoax Chief Crow. Have a good evening.
I'm on Auto Hoax and it feels so good. You just auto believe everything like I knew that you would. In my dream, you know I ain't got time, baby, for another crisis actor with soulless eyes.
My buddy and me.
Telecommunications Act of 1996.
96, y'all.
Gonna filter your eyes and scrub your mind. The weatherman, he's just another bad joke. You can be a doomed little donkey like Eeyore. I'm gonna be in my dream. appear with soulless